so we'll be good with that. And Scott will be late. Okay, I'd like to call the meeting of the pre-ref committee to order at 6:04.
Can you slide this down?
Roll call.
Can you slide that down? Randy Daigle. Tina Lamont.
Here.
Tiffany Devoni.
Here.
Ron Andrews.
Here.
Gina Sakala. Bob Casati.
Here.
Janet Cushman.
Here.
John Day.
Here.
Steve Macchio. Jim Masuda. Amanda Pickett.
Here.
Charlotte Riley.
Here.
Jeff Russo.
Here.
Scott Ryder. Jacqueline Valley.
Here.
And Tecton, we have Jeff.
Yep.
Justin.
Yep.
Antonia. And Chris Likely.
Yep.
Okay, so item 2 is approval of minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from October 8th, 2025?
So moved.
Second. Moved by Mr. Crisati, seconded by Ms. Riley. Show of hands. Item 3, presentation by the architect. I'll turn that over to Tectron.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Jeff from Tecton, along with Justin. Antonia's out this weekend, so that's why she's not here. We have 2 handouts for this evening. Top is the typical kind of update presentation, and then the second is just a snapshot in time on the during the community conversation number 1. We had a Mentimeter, and this is kind of the results of that, along with whoever took it after that, after the community conversation. I think we'll work with Antonia in the district to see if we can maybe republish this somehow to get more.
It's already planned to go out in my newsletter.
Oh, okay.
So we took the QR code and embedded it right in. We did a recap of the community conversation, so that's going to be going out beginning of next week.
Awesome, thank you. So the agenda for us this evening is to just give you a few quick updates on the design team activities. Spend a majority of the time, I think, talking about community conversation number 1, and if you've heard any feedback since. Talk a little bit about the planning options and our refinements. We collected the questions during the community forum, and I have a few slides to talk about those. As far as I think it makes sense to start collecting a frequently asked question list, so that we can post that to the website so that the information's out there. And then we'll go over some of the preferred options as I had mentioned. I think where we landed, I basically pulled the slides on where I think we landed during the last meeting, so we can talk about that in a little more detail. And then basically spend the rest of the time this evening just talking about the preparation and next steps. So at this point, we're waiting on the October enrollment numbers so that the demographer can do their projections. The plan is for them to get those and do all of their updates and come to our next meeting, which is on November 19th, to present the findings. So everything that we've presented up until this date with all the options, if you remember way back when we started with just we said, all right, let's look at a 5 to 10% increase in the enrollment, and we'll use those numbers for now for the planning metrics. So what I'd like to do at this juncture is we'll wait, get those numbers, and I know you're conducting another one, Dr. Prabhu is conducting another independent. We can compare the data and then basically select where we think the numbers are going to be for the enrollment, and then we'll go back through the options and update everything, because everything's based on number of students times square footage times the allowable size, which equals the cost. So that's kind of where we are in the overall process of planning process. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps. We're to a point where I think we can start cost modeling, talking about scheduling, logistics, There's going to be at the next community conversation, which is all virtual, is basically in the middle of December. My suspicion is that folks will have more questions, more detailed questions on, there were some good questions the other night on renovate to new, some questions on timing, some questions on cost and reimbursement. So ideally, we would have all of the updated information plugged into the preferred option with all the costs so that we can adequately answer all of those questions at the next community conversation. So kind of a lot over the next month and a half, but I think perfectly doable with the track that we're on currently. Any questions on the content so far? Okay, so this slide is just a reminder of where we are in our overall schedule, which we're right on track. And as I mentioned, our next meeting, which is on the 19th of November, that's when we're going to start. You can see the middle green line where it says refine the options. Once we have that enrollment data, we can then start refining and honing in on preferred options. So as far as schedule, I think we're right on track. Have a summary of the community conversation. I think a large majority of the folks that are around the table were there that evening, but I'll just give you a quick summary of what was presented. And then talk about the Q&A list, and then we can move into the options. So one slide that we had presented, just overall to communicate the content and the reasons why you've embarked on this master plan is you're looking at 4 main components to our effort: the enrollment, infrastructure assessment, educational programming, and then the community engagement. We roll all of that information together, and it's a master plan. And obviously, we're talking about 10, 15, 20 years, and then generational kind of planning projects. This slide is maybe new to this committee. We presented it at, part of this at our original interview, but also at the community conversation. And I think this is helpful to understand kind of the history of when buildings were built, when some of the changes occurred within your district, and we circled 2011, and this is according to the data that we pulled from all the previous reports. That's when that structure, that restructure occurred, the K to 2, 3, 5 sister or brother school, whatever you want to call it, occurred. So that from that point in time, 2011 till today, is pretty much what we're looking at for the planning options. So as we moved forward, or as this committee and the school district and the town have moved forward, you've looked at it a couple different ways as far as the studies. So you've been at this for quite some time, since 2022. We're here today, and kind of in the center portion, which is highlighted in the yellow, our work, just to communicate this out to the group. This is a more simplified version where we're working on all the assessments, program validation, and the options, and then ultimately, from a planning perspective, we're looking at a spring referendum process with a June 2026 grant application for whatever projects are decided upon, either all together or in phased fashion. And then we just plugged in the 2026 through 2032 just to put things in context as far as the length of time that these projects take from planning to completion. So that is out there in the community, so I felt that you should have that information. And then the next 3 slides just summarize the 3 different components of what we presented at the community conversation. And what we were trying to do out of this community conversation is really just set the baseline understanding of existing conditions, some of the challenges that exist both physically but programmatically in the buildings, talk about the feedback and engagement loop that we've had with the district, the teachers, even before we were involved, but as we are involved, and then start talking about the initial planning options. So this slide is really talking about conditions, and what we tried to do is show a lot of visual images to convey kind of condition for those that, we do throw out a lot of acronym, MEP and HVAC and all those kinds of things, but try to convey the condition and quality of the current status of the buildings. This slide, which is the next slide, talks a little bit about our engagement. One activity that we have coming up that this is really where Antonia shines is that think tank. I know you folks have already had several of those already. We would like to have another one because we think we're far enough along to share out that information and really get a good cross-section of people together from the community to really engage in like a half day-ish kind of session. We have that plan tentatively right now for November 12th. We sent out kind of a list of typically who attends these, and it's some from council, some from the BOE, some from the district, some parents, students. We really like to get a well-rounded group, and it's a really highly interactive session to really set the mission, vision, talk a little bit about the challenges and opportunities that exist with this planning process. So that's a fun one that's coming up that will help round out some of the programmatic activities.
How stuck are we on the 12th?
I'm sorry?
How stuck are we on that date, the 12th?
We had originally discussed that date. Not at all, as far as we're concerned. We can look at alternative dates. We have that.
It's conferences.
Yeah, it's for JF, for elementary.
Pre-K, 5.
Okay, so we'll coordinate.
And it's coming soon, so just think,
Yeah. Yep,
just thinking.
we can coordinate that through the superintendent's office.
You
You
said,
said it's a half day
I would
too?
say, you said half day, so timing wise, what would that look like?
Do I have to take time off work?
So I think we have programmed, let me jump to a slide that shows it a little more clearly so that we can. This guy. So
We
what?
talked about each other.
What we had developed on the right side of this slide was basically 1:30 to 3:30 at Enfield Street for basically grades pre-K to 5. And I thought we had kind of tried to coordinate that with the activities in the district. And then in the afternoon, 4:30 to 6 was kind of town community. In this room.
We do early release on
Okay.
conference day, so it would be like right in the middle of early release.
Sure. So we can move this around, but, and the start and end date times and the date can all change. We're open, but really need about 2 hours or so for those activities. And the reason why we break it into 2 groups, and it can be one group too. But the reason why we do that is just so that everybody has an opportunity to
Nobody wants to
participate.
sit there for 4 hours.
Yeah.
It's not like
Yeah.
one of us.
I'm sorry if I was not a good committee member. It'd be helpful to know like the purpose and the intended audience, because I think then we could think a little bit
Sure.
more deeply about like who the audience is and when we might want to schedule that. Because I think it's important to get feedback, but like, I think there's been lots of opportunities for us to weigh in, and town council and board have alternate ways that they can weigh in through the members who are sitting here. So just thinking about what the purpose is and who we're really trying to get at the table.
Yeah, we will send out this PDF flyer that I think captures some of what you're asking and make sure that it's refined. And then we'll also send out, we have like a sample list, not of people, but of like titles and roles that we typically see involved in there. So absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, let me jump back. So the second section was really just talking about the interaction and understanding programmatically. And then the last section was just kind of setting the table for the discussion relative to the options, and Justin covered this section and really where we opened the door to, what are we actually trying to resolve? And what we're trying to do is is keep it broad enough because this committee knows a lot more than the broader community. So we were trying to just give them a good good foundation on the scope, what the condition is, how much interaction we've had to date, and what we might be looking at for options. So then we had kind of a Q&A session, which I thought was pretty well. Those are just the photos of the printout, and then I summarized them. This is, consider the responses a draft, but it kind of is parallel to what we said during the community conversation for answers. But I thought there were some really good, questions related to, from the outside looking in, these are very good questions. As far as like, when do you lock in reimbursement rate? Great question. Obviously, with any kind of configuration or options planning, there might be some modifications to the attendance zones. When does that occur, and why can't it occur now? And it can't occur now just because of space. So I think that was, a satisfactory answer for the person that asked it, but it's a good question to talk about when that might occur. Quite honestly, the right answer is let's wait on and see on where the demographics are, where the population is. There's going to be some detailed maps in there with kind of where there's where the student density is, because I think that's going to also come into play. And then, so it's a very valid question and very good one as far as when. But right now, I think we don't have enough information to answer that just yet. It's likely going to occur towards the tail end of this plan, just because of the way that we want to. The idea of this plan, no matter where they're located and how big the buildings are, the idea of this plan is to limit disruption to the students. So with using some of these schools as swing space, inevitably you're going to have to wait until the end to kind of resettle out. So it could be phased in, it could be at the end. There's all kinds of answers to this, but at this point we just don't have. We know that it's not going to be next year. It's going to be pretty far off at this point. The next questions were about renovate as new. So I think we need to, now we're moving into that next step. We need to articulate the differences between new and renovate as new and why, what the value is in between those. Most of the options that we've talked here are focused more on new, just to limit the disruption, but we still owe this group and the community that comparison. So we'll work on that for the next meeting. Same question on length of construction. So we have a good kind of data set and explanation of comparing new versus renovation. And then some more detailed questions on reimbursement and how does that 15% apply, which I thought Randy did a good job answering that question. I think some questions on sustainability / making sure you're looking at the best use of the sites and buildings available. Basically a concern for not just going and looking at vacant land because that's the easy button. Our answer, I think, more or less was that we first look to see how we can utilize existing school sites, which we've talked about at length here. Good question on sustainable strategies. We've included it in everything that we've shown this committee to date as far as cost modeling things like geothermal, photovoltaic, and enhanced building envelope for energy efficiency. Do you have to do all of those? No. That's a question as we move into the detailed cost estimates and affordability. If you're going to get a percentage, a reasonably high percentage in as far as reimbursement, it may make sense to invest in that now, because when we have a kind of some data, basically 90% of the costs related to a building are not like day one costs, they're the operational costs. So we can dig into that a little deeper and explain that to this group so that they're able to articulate that out. But I will say, and I think I said it at the community conversation, most of the projects that we've seen, whether we're designing them or others are, include some kind of geothermal hybrid or ERV system, some energy efficient heating, cooling system, some kind of PV, and then most certainly an enhanced building envelope. Some of it's related to just energy codes, current energy codes, but some of it's related to state grant. You have to follow a high performance building standard too. So that's a lot of words, but we'll explain some of that in more detail as we go into detail. Does the state school construction reimbursement rely on federal funding? Not, to our knowledge, not directly. We're not relying on any federal grants in any of our projects at the moment. Well, I shouldn't say that, except for the Inflation Reduction Act, but that's still kind of a little bit up in the air moving forward. Another question about reimbursement rate, and then more questions on new versus renovated as new, and then durability, which I thought was a good one, durability of new buildings versus existing ones. So that was the spirit of the questions that we received. I don't know if we received any emails, John, did we?
We set up the pre-rep account to come to Randy and I, but I haven't gotten any.
Okay.
Yeah, like 5 test emails, just testing the group. That's about it.
Okay, all right. So those are the questions. I can stop there, and if others have heard, I mean, many were at the community conversation, but I don't know if others, I think we have, I looked today, like 244 or so views on YouTube of the recording. So it's pretty good for content that is not all that exciting until we get into options planning. And usually when you talk about layouts and costs is when you get people coming out. So I'll park it there and see if anybody has any questions or additional comments.
There was one comment from Scott Ryder, who's going to be here tonight, so he emailed it to Randy and I.
Yep.
And he was wondering, he's going to watch tonight later. He wants to know if we can formalize the do nothing new / Band-Aids number for the public.
Sure.
For comparison's sake. A few years back, John Day had, what it would cost. Oh, I forget. I see the chart, John, on my head.
We did a presentation on the council.
Yeah, we did a presentation on the council for that, just kind of talking about the high, moderate, whatever, what the buildings needed and how much that was going to cost and how we would get no state reimbursement. And I'm assuming those numbers have gone up dramatically in 2 years. So that was a wonder by Scott.
Sure.
And this is why he wanted us to share. His concern is that a handful of people voted for just do repairs and to buildings versus any new buildings. And people need to know that that's 100% non-reimbursable, and two, that idea still costs tens of millions of dollars just to get these 60 or 70-year-old facilities up to code. So he's just asking if we need an updated
absolutely.
just repairs number for comparison.
Yep. I'll put that on the list. Yep. Great.
Oh, I thought you were looking for it. Let's try to reach your mind. Failed.
Any other comments?
This question, I don't know.
I think that was the biggest thing that came up in our building. We had open house last night and I had my little table up and I talked to everyone. And in our building, all of my students will have been graduated by the time this is finished.
Right.
And they're mostly the younger kids in their family. So it's not like there's younger siblings coming through. And parents are, interested in finding out information, but in their minds, it doesn't affect them, so to speak. But I think the big picture of it does affect you, because just to do nothing is going to cost you as a taxpayer more, is a huge piece that we have to get out there.
Okay.
Taxes are a hot topic, so if we can talk about how that,
Super hot.
right.
Okay. That makes sense.
Kicking the can doesn't help us.
Really doesn't.
So before I jump into the next section, which is just reviewing what I think is the preferred option or direction anyway. Wanted to go over this handout, which I thought was helpful. Again, I think you have to take these with, it's a tool, it's not the only tool to use. But if you look through to the second page about seeing the need, I think we did a decent job. I think we can do a better job. I think adding those do nothing kind of that content, I think is helpful. I like the word cloud, I think is helpful to us. It may not be to others, but it's very helpful to us to understand what content we need to cover in our next presentations. Not sure, does that resonate, the biggest need? Does that seem to make sense to you? So the way that works is the bigger the word, the more people basically commented on those kinds of categories. So we often see safety, capacity or space, and then condition obviously combined.
The only thing I would say is, obviously knowing Mentimeter, this is working off of exact matches, right? So the word's gonna get bigger if it's an exact match. So
Look
you're
at
gonna
those
need,
small words.
in my opinion, you're gonna need to go through all of those little individual small words, because there are likely very similar items that would then
Safety.
impact
Security.
the other pieces. Like I'm even looking at like transportation was one,
Yep,
but then there was another one last time on buses.
Yeah, busing.
So those need
to be collected.
factored in.
Yep, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
almost like sort of.
And I don't know how many safety responses there were or anything like that, but that was the only other piece.
Yeah, we can certainly categorize them and,
Like to renovate each school is on the very bottom.
yeah.
Well, that's clearly scope addition,
Right,
right? So I mean, some of them I think could be even bigger.
Sure, yep,
Sorry, I'm on a.
I agree, I mean, this gives you your talking points.
yep. Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, I'm reading it now. Somebody said safety and then somebody said safety of students, so yeah, I get it. We can put them in buckets and,
Somebody doesn't know that we still have full day K.
I just showed that to Amy.
Oops.
You can have pre-K.
Yeah.
that's, so I
You
think,
Jacqueline.
That just illustrates why we have to put all this information out, or else you're gonna get people go, oh, we're gonna get 7 schools, cool.
very true. I think some of the other questions that I found helpful, the location of pre-K was a decent one that we obviously need to push out to the greater group. And then, the sliding bar, the number in the sliding bar is the median, if you would. That's helpful to see too, that it kind of confirms some of the other questions that we had on the other slides. So we will continue to update this. It's currently open, so the way that it reads, the first few questions read anyway, is that if you're gonna ask somebody to take this, you maybe point them to the PDF of the slide deck or the video first, just so that they can review that first quickly and then go into this.
Can you tell, I don't know the parameters of the program, but can you tell like if engagement was like really high and now it's like dropped off to like nothing, or has it been like consistent?
I don't know enough about it to answer that. I believe you can find when they actually put it out, yes. But I didn't dig into that many details, but I will.
Steve, you're putting it in your newsletter, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe you could report it or whatever.
Or just, when's your newsletter going out?
What's that?
Friday?
Yeah.
So. Yeah, so I think Leslie's got our schedule for like Monday or Tuesday.
Okay, so we'll leave this open and we'll give you an update at the next meeting as well. And if anybody needs anything from us on that particular piece, just let us know. Switching back now to the regular. So this evening, what I did is the content is, for the most part, the same, but what I did is I think where we landed is with an option that's basically around a 4-school option that's mostly is preferred, with a plan to adaptively reuse the remaining buildings so that if somebody in the community is asking what's happening with these other sites, we have a plan. Now, the caveat to kind of this slide and the school locations and the phasing, so there's a lot on the slide. The numbers represent kind of the sequence on the map on the left side. On the right side, the numbers are the same. Then you see the detail of the school. Obviously, the 4 schools are, for the moment, all the same size. They will vary. They're not always going to be that perfect. And then on the bottom right of that, just to be clear, is the green portion of the horizontal bar is what's called pre-construction, or grant approval, design, getting all your approvals in place, and then the white bar is the construction. So, and in this particular option, and again, this is draft form, the sequence can change, the location might change depending on what we get back for the population densities, but the strategy ideally would remain. So if you're getting questions, because I think we're recording these and publishing these, this isn't necessarily set in stone. This is just what we're trying to do is convey a strategy here. Once we get the presentation at the next meeting, then we can start layering that on top of this and saying, all right, what makes sense long-term for us? I know we went over a lot of different options at the last meeting, so I wanted to spend some time on this, explain this one more time, and then answer any questions on this slide before we move ahead. So for example, we might change a sequence. The reason why on this slide Memorial is first is because, in our opinion, that is one of the buildings condition-wise that needs the most attention. So we wanted to try to keep it in the first phase, if you will. And the question is do you do it in phases or do you not? So that the population density is gonna affect this slide, and so is the affordability and tax impact, right? Because when you're looking over here on this bar, most communities, and I'm not a financial wizard, but most communities don't actually pull the bond until they hit that white line, because that's when the real, the more significant dollars are spent on construction. So it could go from 3 in the first phase to 2 in the first phase. It could be 2 and 2. It could be 3 and 1. It could be, that kind of is dependent upon cash flow that we try to get a meeting and get some of this cost model so that we can see, because obviously if this doesn't work from an affordability standpoint, then it all has to work together. So that's the next steps and layers. I think first we want to get the demographic and population so that we can right-size this plan, because that's going to affect the dollars. And at the same time, we can start cost modeling this plan with the numbers that we have and figure out from a sequencing perspective. So I'm going to stop talking, and does anybody have questions on this slide? Somebody must.
Amanda, I
I'm
can always
looking down again there.
You can count on me.
Thank you.
So one is, I'm a little bit of a process person. So I guess I'm confused when we talked about that think tank happening on the 12th to offer all this input, but we already have a plan. If like we're all just agreeing to this, so then what's the point of having a think tank? So I guess my just wonder is, like, are we sure that this is our plan if we haven't tapped into everybody? My next wonder is, I'm gonna continuously push about preschool. I am totally okay with integrated special ed preschool in our 4 buildings. But I truly believe that the outcomes that we see coming from Stowe is that preschool is a different animal. And I truly think we could provide continuity for our most specialized students in their home schools with offering specialized programs, preschool within the 4 schools. But there's still Head Start, STEAM, and our partnership with ECDC that I think we could expand, especially with, like I see here, ECDC expansion. We can only expand if we, A, have a plan and are ready to expand and apply for those seats at the state. And so like, I think there's a conversation around truly what are we doing with preschool and the town conversation about ECDC. I'm more of an advocate for expanding Stowe to be a more holistic preschool site, and we just push in specialized programs. And the timeline I'm just concerned about as far as ECDC's, like Stowe's last on the list-ish. So, Amanda's comments.
Sure, so I can take the first one. So this is what I heard as the preferred option to date. And as I mentioned earlier, when I was kind of queuing this slide up, it's not set in stone. What could change this is if, let's say the demographics come back and they're substantially lower than what we thought. That could change, that will change kind of some of the thought process on these options. So this is part of the conversation, and to answer your question on the think tank, we would talk about the 3 versus the 4 versus pre-K during that think tank as well, because we do want that information. So I'm honest, genuine, and authentic in that this isn't set in stone, but we're going to let the feedback and data. So we're going to let what's best educationally come back to us, and we'll present that. What's best from a financial perspective, put that on the table, and then what's actually happening in your community with the enrollment, and then it's not our decision to push. It's this group's and it's the community's decision. So I want to make sure that I'm clear that this is what I heard to date, but it could change. It could change on a dime. If some variable changes that swings this significantly, that's why we're trying to build in enough. That's why I talked about the strategy. The strategy is important. If it changes from 4 to 3 or for 4 to plus a 1 for pre-K, if that's the choice, we want to make sure that we understand, the variables and how they'll affect one another. In other words, like cost, schedule, and then the phasing. So that's a long-winded answer to say, it could go back to 3, depending on if there's a change in the information. That's what this planning process is about. And it's not our decision by any means. It's really trying to get the information in front of you.
I get that. I didn't mean to be accusatory. I just wanted to understand process work.
Yeah.
And I think for me, and I'm obviously everyone in this room knows, I think preschool is a very unique funding, requirements, staffing, and we've done some really efficient and strategic ways of blending funding, using staffing that will all dissipate when we do this type of model. And so I think even having a conversation about impact on preschool, folks don't truly even understand that unless you're in it, living it.
Yep.
And I'm not sure if we've truly explored can we, like, what would the numbers and look like if we just put specialized programs in the schools? And what would the capacity at Stowe be? Like, would that open up enough space to like give ECDC a little bit more room and then just renovate Stowe, not make it like bigger or different?
Right.
Or whatever school site we're on now. So I'm just asking for some additional creativity and willingness to explore that.
Can I ask the demographic piece that's coming the next meeting?
Yep.
Do they look at whole numbers for the district, or could they drill down to our programs and how they have been expanding, increasing over the years? Like, can they also kind of factor that in at all too? Because that's a huge factor, pre-K all the way up.
You're talking about the attendance in the specialized program.
Right, like, are they looking at demographics of our town, like people and overall number of students, like whether we're at 4,800,
Yep.
whatever, versus we used to be over 5,000? Can they drill it down to look at programs?
They can, I have to ask if they are right now. So they'll look at things like outplacement and what would happen there. I'm talking really just from an MP planning perspective. That's the consultant that's working on one of the enrollment projections. So they'll look at that. They'll also look at the specialized ed programs. It's a good question. I will ask
I
and
think
see
that
if you can
could
pull in that data.
Make or break what we do.
Yeah,
Because I think across the board, we all know, like, our programs have exponentially increased in the last 5-6 years.
Sure.
If not compared to 10, 15 years ago. And I think that's a huge factor also, because even just knowing like how many, say we just did the integrated preschool in the elementary schools, well, how many classrooms would that take versus any other preschool program? Like, just the sheer number of kids, it could drastically shift, like you said, our thoughts moving forward.
Yeah, but they're gonna project pre-K like, can they project like pre-K numbers by itself, like even if we don't, I mean, we have a pre-K program, but not like
that's different.
the universal thing,
Yeah.
so like.
That was my question. Are they
I'm ready to
using,
predict
like,
pre-K
how many years do they go
numbers
back
when they're 3
in terms of
still
young
have
children? And like, how specific can they get? And can they project
Right.
birth rates over time using trend data and like start to anticipate
Yeah.
in 5 years, how many kids will be of that age? And I guess I'm thinking in consideration of the things happening at the state of Connecticut around early childhood. So specifically knowing, people are talking about universal pre-K. I hear it as the governor's early childhood endowment. That doesn't mean that every child has to go to public pre-K.
Right.
So there's a whole other section being considered of doing an overview of identifying how many available preschool seats do we have currently in Enfield for 4-year-olds. We're not talking 3-year-olds for that guaranteed seat, if you will. So the 3-year-olds are just additional. So that's going to be done by, Head Start does conduct one, but in partnership with what's called Early Start, local governance partner, we're going to be conducting some sort of assessment, but I'm wondering if that could also be something the demographers would have access to in some capacity. And is the timeline for applying for those seats and understanding who all is going to apply for them, I'm thinking that sustainability piece, right?
Mm.
So if we're like, well, we're gonna lock it at this number, and I know you said you can only add so many based on a slight projection of increase. I feel like it's really hard to predict exactly how many seats. You have to have some kind of idea.
Yeah.
And then there's also conversation from the current governor and the commissioner of the Office of Early Childhood, and granted this would take time, but when I look at this timeline, it feels like it may align a shift from that part day to full day, especially for those 4-year-old kiddos and integrated. And so that is a huge consideration, because that would double your classrooms.
That's, yeah.
And again, all of that's really unknown. I guess I'm wondering if they can predict anything. Double.
Or do they allow, because you don't know that, like, and they can't predict that, would they allow for
Yeah, so I don't want to speak for his capabilities. Through my experience working with him, the pre-K hasn't been as much of a conversation as it is today.
Right.
I will say, I wonder if it makes sense, I guess I'm looking at the superintendent or John. Does it make sense to maybe have a meeting with Mike and some folks with, specialized ed programs and early, and pre-K to see what you can include in some kind of analysis? Is that, or?
Like, words to three numbers are
Well,
public.
yeah, so, she said I could talk, Ellen, just FYI. The only predictive indicator for like integrated would be our burst of three numbers coming out of like who's in early intervention. And I sat in on a special education conference this year where they had 3,000 new babies, birth three babies that started. They have over 11,000 plans within the state. So what that mean, over 11,000 in the state. So what that means is those kiddos that are coming from birth to three, should those needs be high, those students would come to our integrated program. They would be eligible for our program based on those numbers. So the state of Connecticut, I don't know if you're allowed to use that in any way or form, but those birth to three numbers would be somewhat indicative of the numbers coming up.
Sure.
To access our preschool and then our programs and then the continuum.
So the concern is basically the demographic study for what we don't know. As,
Right.
the kids that are not yet born that will be attending our school. So I would think that this is something that,
It could change the whole plan.
absolutely, but I think it's something definitely the demographer's already facing, especially because you redid schools with the pre-K. So
Yeah.
I think that's like the next takeaway is to figure out what the demographer is gonna say, what he's gonna find, but with the suggestions that you guys your wonders that you wanna bring forward to the
Yeah.
demographer.
I think I'll offer this. Let us take these comments back. We'll communicate this to him tomorrow. And if he feels there's a need for additional conversations, we'll have those.
Perfect.
But let me start with that because
Sure,
I know he's updating numbers for a community that has a pretty robust burst to three program now. So if anybody, I think he has the experience with it. I don't know his exact
Sure,
experience with
absolutely.
it. So
Are you
let me
guys-
ask these questions.
Are you guys happy with that?
Yes.
plan?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm just gonna be that constant nag over here, just so you know.
No, I guess I want to make sure that I hope I'm not reacting negatively to your comments. It's what's important to us in this plan is to make sure that we get it right. This is a plan. It's much more difficult to change it when you're building something. So
I think the
What-
challenge we're all facing
Yeah.
here is like dollars and
Yeah.
cents and like what's best for our community and like how do we.
Like, how are we gonna get
That's a
this through
tough conversation to
referendum?
have.
What I'm wondering is how we're gonna get this through referendum if we don't
Yeah.
get as much of a percentage by not having the pre-K.
No, the pre-K would be in there, so you'd get it.
Yeah.
Because
But the
you'd embed
pre-K
pre-K special ed.
Would it have to be in the bill, I guess?
It would be. So
They're
we
just,
could embed pre-K special ed into the 4 buildings.
Yeah.
So they would get all the 15%.
Yeah.
And redesign Stowe to keep Head Start.
Which you would get no
We
reimbursement.
wouldn't get any reimbursement for Stowe.
But why wouldn't you get the
We
pre-K?
would get like a
reimbursement?
little bit of reimbursement, but it's
With
mixed. It's
Stowe
mixed
doesn't
use.
qualify as a school. It's the same reason why Alcorn doesn't qualify as a school. Shared spaces are problems for reimbursement.
Correct. So that's why you wanna build up Stowe. I don't know if there's gonna be enough money to put that in
I
the referendum.
want to add something as far as like history goes too.
We confirmed it when we did the roof replacement project for Alcorn.
For Stowe would have the
It's
same.
the same
Same.
thing. It's
Right,
a
but if
town
we-
program. Just like, it's not a school,
it's not a school.
it's a program.
Right, but we have school programming in there with Head
It does,
Start.
it's mixed
and-
use is the problem.
But I'm just talking about how much space we have for our EPS students that are
Currently,
in there
currently,
currently.
it's not considered a school.
It has to be more than
It
half.
has to be greater than 50%. And with that, you're only gonna get a portion. Now I'm speaking out of my lane here.
I'll correct you, keep going.
Okay.
You're gonna only get paid that.
But you're only gonna get a percentage of your reimbursement because it's not a 100% school.
And the other concern I have is when the Head Start kids were separated from the rest of the
Yeah.
preschool, that was a big concern because they weren't, we felt like there was inequities in what the Head Start kids were receiving versus when we put them together at Stowe was a better,
Yeah,
more
I think
equitable
just
as
some
far
of the
as seating.
challenges is of
Yes.
getting Head Start seats. But I'm also going to, if we're looking at demographics and pushing for preschool spots, if we're gonna be expanding preschool spots in Stowe, would we get to a number that would give us enough EPS space?
I don't know.
But you're
I don't know who's
trying to expand
expanding.
ECDC in Stowe. So that's more town, that's gonna, so that we
Why
did
can't
last
we
meeting,
expand the seats?
we had.
Who's gonna pay for it?
Never mind. We can keep going the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, we have a number, I think the issue is right now, currently, today, we have a number of questions that need to be answered that we can't answer.
Right.
Like, I've got an entire pre-K program that funding is being pulled away from.
Yeah,
That's my immediate, this is 5 years down the road.
yeah.
So
I'm with you, Steve, on the immediate.
Yeah.
I'm with you there.
So, yeah, so we know that this is definitely
Poor
something that
Jacqueline's
we're
gonna
gonna.
reinvent herself multiple times over.
This is something that's gonna be on the table, on the wall, every meeting until we have the numbers that we know we need. And then that can be a bigger discussion. And I have faith that you guys are gonna meet up with Jackie and,
Yeah, I think
The
if he
plan
asks,
is
if
to-
he shares the concerns and we need to have another meeting, you know, we're always available to have a meeting. Well, I pulled Jacqueline into this because we needed to have the pre-K.
yeah, I think that this is a process that, you know, EPS isn't used to having the amount of say and input. So I think it's important that remember, like, nobody's gonna be making decisions without the input of you guys because you guys are the experts. So, you know, I think we're in a good spot, so.
I also think if we're thinking about questions to ask the community, I think we're overlooking this notion that we know we have kids who go to kindergarten who didn't have preschool, and that may be by choice. Like, not everybody wants to send their child to preschool, not everybody wants full day. So I think we should have a better idea of how many people prefer part day versus full day. What are they really looking for? Is it like, you know, is it a personal choice? Do they absolutely need it? And are they looking for this super long care? I think that's helpful in understanding what is really needed, because I don't want to speak for ECDC in any capacity, but they're not just going to apply for seats if there's not a need, right? So I think we need to know what the need is from the community.
And
How much
I
in
think-
building to put them in?
I think the community also needs to understand that, because I've heard it a lot lately, that the mandatory pre-K just means that we have to provide it, not that everybody who's of pre-K age has to go to it.
And we have to provide some opportunities.
Right.
It doesn't mean that we have to have a seat
For
for every
every-
single child,
Right.
because it's across the community.
Correct.
Okay. So we will know
Yeah, these are all.
when we have our next, I think,
Yep.
in-person community conversation. That's something we should try to draw to get those young families out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, even if we have to, you know, go to ECDC, the parents with infants, go to all the home daycares, the daycare centers, and try to get people more involved that way.
Appreciate the dialogue.
Yeah, no, this is a good conversation. We'll communicate that back to Mike, and he'll be better prepared for next meeting to report that out.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, let me go back to, not the start, promise. So we were on this slide. The slides after it really just speak to some of the strategies on each of the sites themselves. We did go over this at the last meeting. At the moment, I wasn't planning to spend much more time unless people had feedback or questions on what we shared.
I just didn't know if in the presentation it was meant to, there's a duplicate,
Yeah.
So Hazardville Memorial, and then Hazardville, it's the exact same slide. I didn't know if you meant to go through all four, or,
So the only difference between this slide that I show on the screen and the next slide that I show on the screen is for the Little League folks that are in the room. I just changed this. That was part of me trying to get some.
He doesn't think that soccer should get all the fields.
oh, that's not the way you wanna go.
In all seriousness,
Jeff was very happy with the first slide.
yeah.
What happened? Christina's very happy with
I agree, Christine.
I got it.
I was just
You know
showing
what, I
both.
was looking
Yeah.
and studying, and I'm like, what is different?
It's like the picture, circle the
The
difference.
one field.
Yeah.
One field.
you might need a third slide for football.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, we'll continue to show options, for fields and
Gotcha.
parking and things like that. It's really just to show you, I guess, scale is what we're trying to show you there, on each of the sites.
Thank you.
Sure. And then we did include, the conversations relative to, Enfield Street and what the possibilities are. This, I think we would leave more or less in this general state as far as, things that are on this plan that could be reimbursed are more or less what, like we talked about last time. The central office, you get basically your reimbursement rate at half of the base rate, for central office, and likely alternative education, as well. The other programs might be a stretch, but we can take a swing at the adult ed wouldn't. So some components of this building could qualify. Once we get a more solidified plan, we'll hone in on the costs. I'm gonna jump to community engagement. We already talked about revisiting the think tank date, so we'll do that. The other piece that, well, we talked about the survey already, so I won't duplicate that. We talked about the next community conversation, which is on the 17th. The one piece that I think, I was looking at the website today, wondering if we should get the PDFs of I'll get you fresh PDFs of our previous presentations.
Great.
So that those can be posted too, because I know we're recording now, and sorry for those that are gonna be watching this, I didn't go full screen there, so I'm sharing, but, so I'll get you those.
I'll put them on a separate page.
Yeah,
Off there, and just keep a running list from there.
Right. No emails, we talked about that. So I wanted to, kind of a short-ish meeting tonight, because we're waiting on, the updates, to the enrollment numbers.
We start by tomorrow. We finish tomorrow.
Oh, okay, yeah, great, that's great. So I've already covered one, I think, but I just want to set the table that once we get the report, I asked them to get a report a week in advance of the meeting so we could circulate it to you folks so that you guys can look at it, because I know this is a pretty significant topic. I'll talk to them about what we just talked about. And I want to make sure that everybody's clear, including the community that's here and listening at home, that the cost modeling, the size of the building, the student enrollment, those are all going to change based on whatever we decide to use for the numbers. So there's not it's just that's part of the process. The next meetings that are, I think, critical to making sure that we have progress are, I mentioned before, cash modeling and cash flow will help with that, but I'm thinking Chris and Randy are going to help get a meeting with whomever in the town finance director to start looking at that, because I think we need to have answers for the December meeting, whatever they may be, so that, because it's going to impact our planning. I think if we're not clear on the detailed data on the enrollment with the special programs in the pre-K, then we can go back and have a follow-up meeting. We'll put a pin in that one until we have the presentation. So you know, we know that this enrollment, pre-K, those are all hot topics that we know we need to resolve. So we won't rest until they are. I think we captured the potential departments across the town that we could plug into the schools, or the school Enfield. If there's others that, I don't want to reach too far outside our scope, but if there's things that make sense, where if there are at least spaces or whatever it may be, that may work well with the plan the proposed adaptive reuse plan for Enfield Street, we should include those. We'll make sure that we talk about that at the next community conversation as well. And then I think we should start laying the groundwork for communicating to your delegation relative to if we are in fact headed towards, whether it's this June or not, but that's the current plan, some kind of grant applications. Historically, there's a short session this coming year. And for example, Eagle, the math just doesn't work with, you know, you plug in the number of students you need to space. So I think we talked about this before, but you'll need a space waiver to get the appropriate space for that program to function, because the math just doesn't work in their formulas. That is nearly impossible to get through DAS procedures. So that would likely be a special legislation request. So I just want to make sure that as we roll forward, if these are the needs and this is the plan, that's a conversation. I'm not sure who from this table has that conversation, but.
I was gonna say, we have two representatives
Sure.
that are actually running for the town council.
Okay.
So we have like double duty with them. So if they both get elected after November 4th, they should probably both be on this committee. So that you can kill two birds with one stone.
Yes.
Sure.
So we will know more
Yeah.
a week from
So,
yesterday.
yeah, happy to meet with whomever to bring them up to speed. We often do, just to explain.
I think it would just be so much easier if they were staple
Yep.
members on the
Absolutely.
committee, because then you could have,
Yep.
you know, if something came up and you came to a meeting and then it's not a flurry of emails back and forth,
Yep.
and you would be able to get answers hopefully quicker, or be able to give directives
Sure.
better communication, I think, if we can
Yeah.
get them on the committee.
That would be ideal. I just wanted to flag that because that's our recommendation, knowing that it's difficult to get things like space waivers. Our recommendation is to try to do it in special legislation, so you don't, and just do it all when you're filing for the grant, so that it's all buttoned up. So.
No, it makes total sense, yeah.
Yeah, so we should.
Hopefully we can be
I
hopeful
think
in
there's,
that respect.
there's definitely opportunity there.
Yep.
I mean, the state's really pushing for increased regional special education behavioral programs. That's exactly what this is.
Yep, so just wanted to put that in there. And then under 3 for program development, what we went over this at the last meeting. I didn't include it in this presentation. EPS staff put together a really good kind of summary of the programmatic needs across the potential pre-K to 5. What we'll do is develop more of a space program to validate if that program is going to fit within the space allocation that the state gives. So in other words, this is what you want. Does it fit in the bucket that the state says you can build? So that analysis will, I was kind of waiting until we get the final numbers, but we're going to start drafting that out. That's an important dialogue because it affects your effective reimbursement rate. So we're going to try to make sure that what you want fits in the bucket. But if there's some delta, I want to communicate that early to you folks. So in other words, you might need another space waiver for,
I was gonna say, could
Yeah.
that be along
Yeah.
similar lines?
Yes.
Because it's the same idea, right?
It
It's approximately, yeah.
and to give the example, Justin's working on a project where they have some of these specialty programs, and to adequately to provide the adequate space for that program to function well, it's larger rooms and toilets and storage and that is hard to fit under.
The same number of people in those programs.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't.
And just having that already,
This is an end goal
already
for
cooked, from a legislative perspective, keeps everybody's synapses intact when we're in OGA review meetings and we're talking about spaces and everything, so.
Yeah.
I'm sure, Chris, you've been a part of those meetings where they can spiral pretty quickly if you don't already have that lever in hand.
I have a question too. I know there's the 15%, we've talked about 15% for pre-K, 15% for SPED. How does the reimburse work when it's pre-K students who are in specialized programs? Is it not specialized because it's considered integrated?
Ooh, that's a big question.
Preschool stuff's never known.
Sorry.
I don't know that it's broken out like that.
I like your thought process there.
I think
but-
it's just pre-K and that's it. It's
So
just considered.
I thought the pre-K covered the whole building.
It does.
And then in
It's three
addition
classes.
to, there's
You
going
get
to be
one more.
specialized programming within that whole building.
We're
Can you double dip?
working
My
within,
guess is they're
That was
not gonna
special
view,
education.
my guess is they're not gonna view, and this is a total guess.
If you know,
Integrated pre-K is gonna be not identified as a specialized.
Right.
program.
But
it
the
would
other-
be 5 pre-K programs instead of 3, and you'd have 3 regular and 2 specialized. But on the drawings or anything that would be presented, it would
No,
just be
that's not
shown
it.
as,
Right, but he's saying to play with it.
I'm using it as an example. I don't know how many there would be. It could be 4, 2, it could, whatever the number is, but if those are being included, then they'll be part of the square footage within the building. However many number classrooms they end up being, right, will be in the building. And that additional reimbursement will get applied to the cost of the entire building.
Okay.
I don't know that they're so
Dialed into that.
dialed into that, right?
I can tell you in Cheshire, where our birth to 3 program is an integrated pre-kindergarten, and they just, they qualified for the 15% pre-kindergarten.
Okay.
The other school, Norton School, there were classrooms within the building that were intensive education, there were specialized programs. That was the specialized program, 15%. So we weren't able to get 30% on those.
Amy's got wishful thinking.
I was trying.
I do like the way
I
you
was
say
trying.
Keep it coming. Keep it- yeah.
I mean, that would be great. But like 99.9 sounds great.
We can pick up
There
that
is a cap to-
20%.
it does say that
It's not
you're
exceeded.
capped at a certain percentage threshold.
Yeah, they won't pay you to.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I was just curious, and I know that obviously it's integrated, so it's like it's typical peers and our, our population, but it is very specialized in who we hire and who we have in there and things like that, so I was just curious.
It's worth asking for clarification, because I've done some cost modeling where we've tried to take advantage of it. Cheshire doesn't have pre-K in Norton.
Correct.
That's the.
That's so different.
So we,
Right.
and this is all new because it was new of spring session last year, so nobody submitted a grant based on that language. So it might be, maybe we'll ask that question. It's worth asking.
And as a reminder, we don't know how long that program is gonna stay around.
I think it's caught a lot of communities' attention, so
Yeah.
my guess is we'll see.
But they're not gonna let, if I know the state well enough, they have a certain bucket of money they're planning on. And when that bucket gets close to being used, the program will go away,
Mhm.
right? So
Yep.
you don't wanna be late to the game of applying for the bucket of money.
Okay, so that's the program development good conversation there. I just want to give you some insight as to what's ahead. And then the last piece, we already talked about getting more surveys out there. The Q&A I'll circulate, and I can't read the last one. Oh, and posting all the previous presentations.
I can add to that. So Scott and I have worked on a Facebook page because that's, I think, how we're going to connect to some of the families is through
Sure.
social media. We haven't put it out there yet because it is election madness right now. So we'll probably wait till the end of next week
Okay.
or the beginning of that week to go live with it. And then we'll be able to, ask people to share, post to the family groups, the mom groups, the forums, and different things like that to get the word out there. So that is a takeaway that this group needs to do. And so we'll make sure that happens.
Great, thank you.
Is there something we can have for conferences? I mean, I'm thinking for to get the feedback from the younger families, we get nearly 100% attendance at conferences in preschool.
We just have to.
So they do, so I
QR
so we just
have
QR
the
code
QR
out
code.
to teachers.
Oh, but they wouldn't have attended tonight.
Well,
You could just say if you weren't able to attend.
yeah, if
But I
we
think that's a great idea.
we can set up a flyer with the QR code to bring you to the video and then the QR code to do the survey, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
That way they can either listen or look at the presentation and then they can take the survey. Okay, so our takeaway for tonight,
Either to give it to them on their way up.
yeah, that is the November, you said? It's the day.
12.
Right.
The day that we have planned. Yeah. Yeah, we can
We
definitely
can get that
work on
page,
something, yep.
Facebook page up and running. You
So
can always refer them to that page.
we'll work on the Scott Ryder question of do nothing.
Yes.
That came up a couple times. Obviously, the pre-K enrollment and specialized ed enrollment. The tax impact or affordability. And then some of the community conversation pieces. There's a lot of other things that we'll be working on, but I think that was the major ones that we need to address.
Resend the flyer for the think tank, the definition.
Oh, yes, thank you.
And a new date, right? New date for.
Yeah, we'll work with the district to get a date that works for everybody. Thinking the day after Thanksgiving, everybody should be free, right?
Just keeps being open on the calendar.
I was gonna say, I have to
I'm not
block
going
out.
right.
No.
Otherwise, it's populated.
Why is this whole thing?
Yeah, you do that on your calendar,
All
you're
the
like, oh, I have no meetings. Oh, it's a holiday.
That's how we ended up with mediation on Columbus Day.
So we have to schedule a new meeting date. So the new board gets sworn in on the 18th. When does the council get sworn in?
I believe it's the day before. I count my chickens before they hatch. I believe it's the
If you're
day,
there, then we know.
We have our study at the
I believe it's the day before.
10th and the 18th,
meeting?
so
We're the 19th.
No,
We're set for the 19th. I mean, set.
I think the townhouse is the 7th.
yeah, the board is definitely the 18th.
Yep.
Yes. So,
So
we're not gonna have time to, oh no, they would have time because they're gonna know after the election.
Yeah.
All right, well, we'll stay on the 19th. But there could be a new configuration of elected folks here, so.
Right.
Okay.
So we'll stick with that, the 19th.
And then that's a question, I don't know if anybody knows the answer. With this committee, if people don't get elected, how does that work?
So there's a discussion that I've had with Randy because the resolution for this committee is very elected official focused.
Yes.
And, Randy has been very clear that he does not like that.
Right.
So that's a discussion I told Randy we're gonna have to have after the 4th, because some of us aren't even on the ballot.
Right.
So,
Like
like Jim, Charlotte, me.
Right.
So, I don't know. Because, I don't know.
I just didn't know either, so.
I do have some dates here.
Yeah.
November 10th is the new council swearing in day,
Okay.
and the 17th is the first council meeting, and then the 18th is.
So when they get elected, a majority on the 4th, then immediately they start reaching out to their caucuses and setting up the committee assignments. So, but I will be having a conversation with Randy between now and then, so.
When they get on the board, they better know that the next day's a meeting.
Your first meeting.
Some people better be prepared to go.
I know, that's what I was thinking when I heard it was on the 19th, but they'll at least have committee
Well, I
assignments.
know in the past that if somebody that was on the committee did not get reelected, they were off the committee,
Yeah, that's usually how it
Don't feel
works.
that
unfortunately.
You're just going to meetings.
But Randy is very unhappy with the makeup.
We try to make sure.
Well, typically when you put together a pre-ref committee, it's more electors and then your elected officials are just your liaisons. So we will figure that out. And then, so that's all set, more to come. There'll be new committee members. Are there any committee member comments from the liaisons? Committee members, do you have any? Are there any good to the order? Is there anything else anybody would like to discuss this evening before I close out the meeting?
Thank you, nice job. Thank you for your service, Charlotte and Tina.
Yes. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Pickett, seconded by Ms. Riley. All in favor?
We do this a lot. She's always the first to say.
Meeting adjourned at 7:20.
Not always.